A kid turns into a real monster. The Gloria Gary story. Dive into the depths of a gripping tale that unravels in the quiet streets of Des Moines, Iowa. Today, we delve into the mysterious disappearance of Gloria Gary, an ordinary woman with an unordinary fate. Join us as we piece together the chilling events from the sudden vanishing to the shocking discoveries that followed. If you're intrigued by stories that challenge reality and reveal the unexpected, make sure to subscribe and like for more content. Let's embark on this puzzling journey together and shed light on the dark corners of an everyday world transformed by crime. In a baffling case of sudden disappearance, a solitary woman named Gloria Gary went missing within the confines of her own home. The suspect, apprehended shortly after, claimed he had left the body inside, yet no trace of Gloria was found, deepening the mystery of her whereabouts. On a separate yet strangely interconnected event, a young man was navigating the rural highways of northern Utah in a red Honda. With his fuel gauge perilously close to empty, he parked on the side of the road, the nearest gas station nowhere in sight, and his pockets devoid of cash. Stranded and unsure, he remained in his car, pondering his next steps. Simultaneously, a passerby in another vehicle noticed the stationary Honda. Given the secluded nature of the location, surrounded only by fields and distant farms, he sensed that the young driver might be in trouble. Opting for safety, he contacted the local police to check on the motionless car, hoping they could offer assistance to whoever was inside. Responding to the call, an officer arrived on the scene and conducted a routine check by radioing in the car's license plate to identify the owner. Exiting his vehicle, the officer approached the Honda. At that moment, the driver's door swung open and a young man stepped out holding an empty gas can. He appeared much younger than his legal age suggested. Upon inquiry, the youth explained his predicament. He had run out of gas and had no money to refill. He had been waiting, hoping for a kind motorist to help him refuel. During their conversation, an urgent radio message alerted the officer that the car was registered to a 49-year-old woman named Gloria Gary, who was reported missing. The young man at the wheel was not the owner, deepening the mystery of the situation. Gloria Gary, a 49-year-old IT analyst, had been reported missing on January 5, 2017, after not being seen for several days. Her disappearance was particularly alarming as she had last been observed leaving work at 1 p.m. on January 3rd. She had stopped for a meal at a local pizzeria before heading home in her red Honda. But then she vanished without a trace. Gloria was known for her punctuality and reliability, which made her sudden absence from work the next day, January 4th, very concerning to her colleagues. They initially thought she might have simply overslept, but as the day progressed without any sign of her, worry began to set in. That evening, Gloria had plans to have dinner with her father and sister. However, she never arrived, nor did she respond to any calls. Her family, knowing her as a meticulous and responsible person, found it uncharacteristic of her to miss an appointment without informing them. The situation escalated when Gloria again failed to show up for work on January 5th. Her employer, growing increasingly anxious, reached out to her sister to inquire about her whereabouts. Meanwhile, a young man named Kyle Alexander Jepson, 22, had been found driving Gloria's car. He was taken to the police station for questioning after he was found stranded with the vehicle on a rural Utah highway. The police were trying to piece together how Kyle had come into possession of the car and what had happened to Gloria. During his interrogation, Kyle revealed a startling detail. Gloria had not actually disappeared. He insisted that she was still in her house. This revelation was confusing because her relatives had already thoroughly searched her home and found no trace of her. The police were faced with a puzzle. How could Gloria still be in her house if she was nowhere to be found? As the investigation continued, Gloria Gary had a life filled with routines that she rarely deviated from. Several times a week, she would enjoy dinner at her father's house, and on other nights, she'd meet friends at the local pizzeria. It was unusual for her to break these habits without a very good reason. If something unexpected, like an illness or an emergency, had occurred, Gloria would have definitely informed a family member, but no such messages were received. Instead, all calls to her phone were being redirected to her voicemail, which was unusual for Gloria and caused her family's worry to escalate. Gloria came from a close-knit family that included her father, 2 sisters, and a brother, all of whom had families of their own. She was a beloved aunt, cherished by her nieces and nephews for her kind and cheerful nature. Neighbors knew her as the lady with the soft voice, always polite and never involved in any sort of trouble. Gloria's life was simple. She had a passion for romance and mystery novels, often buying them in large quantities to indulge her love for reading. This hobby took up much of her free time, making her a quiet and unobtrusive neighbor. Despite the bright red color of her car, which might suggest a more flamboyant personality, she was anything but conspicuous. Her sudden disappearance was completely out of character, prompting her brother-in-law to act as the family spokesman. At his wife's urging, he contacted the police to report Gloria missing. He stressed that it was highly unusual for Gloria to leave without informing anyone, which only deepened the mystery of her whereabouts. In their search for answers, Gloria's sisters scoured her house looking for any clue that might explain her sudden disappearance, but they found nothing out of the ordinary. Even her car, the red Honda, was nowhere to be found. The absence of both Gloria and her car led the family to fear the worst. That day, the police formally declared Gloria missing and issued a public statement asking for vigilance. They urged anyone with information about the 49-year-old resident of Des Moines, Iowa, to come forward, hoping that community tips would help locate her and bring her home safely. Gloria Gary was officially described in the police alert as a Caucasian female with black hair and brown eyes, standing 5 feet 5 inches tall and weighing about 110 pounds. She typically wore thin-frame glasses. The last time anyone saw her, she was dressed in a long, dark sweater and pants. The alert also included details about her vehicle to aid in identification. In response to her disappearance, the Gary family sprang into action. Even though they were unsure of where to begin, they committed to exploring every possible avenue to find Gloria. They utilized social media and the mass media, distributed flyers featuring Gloria's photo, and set up a special account for tips from those who might be hesitant to speak directly with the police. The family poured their efforts into these actions, holding onto hope for any positive outcome. Despite their proactive efforts, there was an underlying fear of the worst-case scenario as the search continued. Gloria's car, easily identifiable by its bright color, became a crucial element in the search. Eventually, this distinctive red Honda was spotted in southern Utah in a town called Parowan, which rekindled a glimmer of hope among her worried relatives. On that day, around 12:45 p.m., a pair of local police officers patrolling near a 24-hour convenience store noticed the bright red car. They quickly checked the license plate and forwarded the details to their dispatch team. Initially, they moved on with their patrol, but upon receiving confirmation that the vehicle belonged to a missing person, they hurried back to the store. However, by the time they returned, the red Honda had already left the parking lot. Determined to gather clues, the officers reviewed the store's surveillance footage. During the time frame the car was spotted, they managed to capture images of a suspect driving Gloria's car. These images were enhanced and shared on social media platforms, described as showing an adult white male with distinctive markings on his arm, which could have been a tattoo, a glove, or possibly a gun. When Gloria's family saw the images of the man on social media, they were baffled. They did not recognize him and could not understand his connection to Gloria. The uncertainty and the strange details of the man's appearance only deepened their distress and urgency to uncover the truth behind Gloria's mysterious disappearance. The Gary family was deeply troubled by the fact that Gloria was nowhere to be found in Utah, especially since she had no known connections to the area. This information led them to believe that the young man found with her car must have stolen it. As their worry intensified, they couldn't help but wonder where Gloria could possibly be. However, their acute anxiety was somewhat alleviated the next day, on January 12, 2017, when the police made a significant breakthrough. A man driving a truck noticed the red Honda parked by the side of a rural road and decided to call the police. His alertness brought the authorities to the scene, where they would make a critical arrest. When the officer arrived, he noticed condensation on the car's windows, suggesting someone had been inside for a while. The car itself seemed altered. Part of its red paint was sprayed over with black, and the passenger window was broken, patched up hastily with orange and silver duct tape. After calling in the car's license plate number, the officer approached to investigate further. At that moment, the young man emerged from the vehicle carrying a gas can. He seemed to anticipate the officer's questions and tried to explain his situation, hoping the officer wouldn't notice the altered license plates. His hands, stained with black paint, indicated his recent attempt to disguise the bright red Honda. The young man concocted a story about running out of gas and not having any money, but the officer was more concerned about the damaged window. The young man claimed he had covered it with tape after it was broken. When pressed on how the window broke, he spun a bizarre tale about sitting in the car with a machete, striking at the dashboard in frustration and accidentally breaking the glass. This explanation seemed far-fetched and did little to convince the officer of his innocence. The officer, still skeptical, decided to ensure the young man had no weapons. After a thorough search, it was confirmed he was unarmed despite the lack of immediate danger. The circumstances surrounding the young man and the stolen car remained highly suspicious, prompting further investigation into his connection to Gloria's disappearance. The officer swiftly placed the young man in the back of the patrol car and drove him to the station for further questioning. Just then, a radio message confirmed that the red Honda was registered to a missing woman from Des Moines, Iowa. The officer questioned the young man about the ownership of the Honda, and initially he claimed it was his aunt's car but struggled to recall her name. As the questioning intensified, he realized that lying was futile and finally confessed to stealing the vehicle. He described how he had taken. The unexpected turn of events began when a Utah police officer responded to a routine call about a vehicle parked on a rural road shoulder. The situation escalated quickly when the officer discovered he had detained a suspect involved in a grave crime. Staring at Kyle Jepson, the young man in custody, the officer found it hard to believe that such a seemingly ordinary individual could be capable of committing such a heinous act. Upon bringing Kyle to the station, the officer immediately contacted detectives from Des Moines who were leading the investigation into Gloria Gary's disappearance. When Kyle was interrogated, he shockingly confessed to the murder, revealing the chilling randomness of his actions. Kyle explained to the investigators that on January 3, 2017, he impulsively decided to break into a house while walking through the Merle Hay neighborhood. He chose a house at random without any premeditation or knowledge of who lived there. His plan was simply to enter and wait for whoever lived there to come home. The situation took a tragic turn when Gloria Gary returned to her house, unsuspecting and carrying a pizza box. Kyle, who had been hiding inside, surprised her by jumping out and attacking her. In a horrifying escalation, he physically assaulted her and strangled her until she stopped breathing, initially under the impression that she had merely fainted. After realizing that Gloria was dead, Kyle's actions grew even more gruesome as he violated her body. He described feeling detached during the attack, as if observing his actions from outside himself, and claimed he was overwhelmed by a sense of control that disconnected him from reality. The confession was a disturbing revelation for the police, detailing a senseless and brutal crime that had resulted in the loss of an innocent life. The investigators were now faced with the task of piecing together the events that led to Gloria's tragic end while dealing with the shock of the grim details disclosed by Kyle. After the heinous act, Kyle Jepson didn't immediately flee Gloria Gary's house. He knew he had committed a serious crime but felt that prison was too severe a punishment for him. Instead, he spent time pondering his next steps while remaining in the victim's home. Kyle made himself comfortable. He took a shower, watched television, played games on Gloria's phone, and even read some of her books. Additionally, he used Snapchat to send multiple messages and photos to his friends, though it's unclear if these messages contained any hints of his crime. The Gary family had entered Gloria's residence multiple times to search for any sign of her, but found nothing. They had even reported her missing and allowed the police to inspect the house when the investigation commenced. During these initial visits, detectives thoroughly inspected the home, but were hindered by the lack of a search warrant, which limited them to only visual inspections without opening doors, exploring the attic, basement, or checking enclosed spaces like closets and drawers. The detectives could only conduct a basic walkthrough permitted by the family to look for any obvious signs of Gloria or foul play. Despite these efforts, no trace of her was found inside the home. Kyle, however, insisted that he had left Gloria's body there. This discrepancy puzzled both the family and the authorities, who were determined to uncover the truth. Now, armed with Kyle's confession, the investigators were in a position to obtain a search warrant. This would allow them to legally conduct a more invasive and thorough search of Gloria's house. They hoped this would finally reveal the location of her body and provide the missing pieces of this tragic puzzle. The authorities were committed to doing everything in their power to resolve the case and bring closure to the Gary family. After completing all necessary legal procedures, detectives returned to Gloria Gary's house to conduct a more thorough search. They meticulously examined each room, including the attic and basement. The search was challenging as Gloria suffered from what appeared to be a hoarding disorder, which made navigating the cluttered space difficult. During their search, the detectives eventually discovered a dead body concealed within the house. The body was believed to be that of Gloria Gary, but to confirm the identity, it was sent for an autopsy. The results of the examination brought the family's deepest fears to life. It was indeed Gloria. The authorities were tight-lipped about why the body had not been found earlier, only mentioning that it was well hidden due to the unusual living conditions in the house. They refrained from providing specific details about the location of the body out of respect for privacy. Des Moines, the city where this tragic event occurred, translates to City of Monks and serves as Iowa's commercial, financial, and transportation hub. The city, home to just over 200,000 people, was generally considered safe until a sudden increase in crime in 2017. That year, Des Moines experienced a surge in violence, with 3 fatal incidents recorded on the first day of the year alone. The unnerving experience and subsequent events, including the murder of Gloria Gary, compelled Alicia to move out of state with her children. They no longer felt safe in their home in Des Moines, particularly after learning about the violent crime linked to their neighbor. This move was partly driven by the need to protect her family from any further threats. Following the discovery of Gloria Gary's body, Kyle Jepson was charged with first-degree felony, robbery, and burglary. He had already faced charges of second-degree burglary from the December 2016 incident at Alicia's house, which resulted in a cash bail being set at $1 million. These charges reflected the gravity of his crimes and his apparent escalation in violent behavior. These events culminated in 2 tragic narratives. The first was the horrific death of Gloria Gary, a woman who led a quiet and modest life and was beloved by those who knew her. The community was left reeling from these shocking incidents, which shattered the peace of what was once considered a safe neighborhood. The second tragedy, stemming from Kyle Jepson's actions, was the profound grief and loss experienced by his parents. It's hard to imagine the pain they endured. As parents, they watched Kyle grow up, celebrated his achievements, and loved him unconditionally. The shock of discovering that their child had committed such a heinous act was overwhelming. They were left to wonder what went wrong during his upbringing and why their loving son turned into someone capable of murder. This question would haunt them for the rest of their lives, making them question every step they had taken in raising him. Kyle had once worked at a pub just 10 minutes from where Gloria Gary lived. He was well regarded by his employer and had formed friendly relationships with his coworkers. However, after he quit his job, people noticed that Kyle became withdrawn and distant. Eventually, he disappeared from their lives completely. During the search for Gloria, her family asked the staff at the pub to display a flyer with her photo. A server placed it on the window, not realizing the connection that would soon emerge. This normal act of posting a flyer led to a shocking realization for many. Gloria's family was devastated to learn that the man responsible for her death had been employed at the pub. The staff at the establishment were equally horrified to discover that their former coworker was the murderer of the woman in the flyer they had casually displayed. The hoarding or Diogenes syndrome is a recognized psychiatric disorder characterized by an inability to discard items regardless of their actual value. This condition leads to severe clutter and unsanitary living conditions. Some hoarders collect animals, unable to provide them with necessary care, leading to distressing living conditions. Others might start hoarding to save money, collecting broken items or food remnants, gradually accumulating more items picked from the street. Another form of hoarding involves collecting newspapers, magazines, and books. People with this type of hoarding keep bringing new items into their home without disposing of the old, resulting in a chaotic and cluttered living environment. They find it difficult to part with these items, especially books and magazines, which they may feel still hold value or could be useful in the future. In Gloria Gary's case, her hoarding was tied to her solitary lifestyle and her passion for romance novels and mystery books. Living alone, she found solace and companionship in her books, which filled her home to the brim. This habit turned her living space into a labyrinth of literature, making it difficult for anyone, including the police, to navigate or search effectively. Gloria's story is a poignant example of how personal habits, even those as seemingly harmless as collecting books, can have unforeseen consequences. Her condition not only isolated her in life, but also obscured the tragic circumstances of her death, complicating the efforts to find her and bring closure to her case. Gloria Gary's passion for romance novels and detective stories was evident throughout her home. She would read each book from cover to cover and then neatly arrange them in cabinets. As her collection grew and the bookshelves filled, books began to spill over onto windowsills and furniture. Eventually, when all available spaces were filled, she resorted to stacking them directly on the floor. Gloria found it impossible to part with any of her books once she had read them. Tragically, these piles of books played a role in concealing her demise. The young man responsible for her death exploited the clutter by hiding her body beneath a large pile of these books. Due to the numerous stacks throughout her home, Gloria's relatives didn't notice anything unusual about the new accumulation, mistaking it for just another heap of books. Gloria was known for her kindness and sincerity, traits that endeared her to her friends. She was a gentle soul who did not deserve her fate at the hands of a reckless young man who showed little regard for life. This concludes the tragic tale of Gloria Gary, a story that intertwines the comfort of literary worlds with the stark reality of a life taken too soon. The tragic case of Gloria Gary serves as a poignant reminder of how hidden struggles within a seemingly normal lifestyle can escalate.